all of it,
Conference will
the
now be
way
recorded.
we, live and work there together, the mission of the place, this whole idea of being off the earth for the earth, the floating and flying. I mean, there's something pretty incredible about that. And that, kind of that extraordinary aspect of that place is certainly a part of it. But I'd have to say something that really stands out, that really sets it apart, is absolutely the view out the window. And that's whether you're experiencing it during your workday or you're just purposefully floating in front of that place, sucking in that view. And it never got old. I worried actually when I first got there, like, oh, am I going to just float by the window and say, that's just Earth out the window, but it never ever got old. And so there was always something surprising about it. It kind of evolved from looking at it like this place where you're trying to find particular places and learn more about it, to just appreciating the awesomeness of it and wanting to be surprised by that. And so um, I don't know if I answered your question. It's
100%,
but
absolutely.
it's a big thing.
I can imagine that. Everybody, well, the few books that I've read, they always mention that. In your case, how soon did you got the opportunity to watch Earth?
Almost immediately, actually. I think, on both flights, I flew up on the space shuttle. And on my first flight, I was on the mid deck, down kind of below. There's really not a window there, but we have cameras that are watching the whole launch sequence and everything out the front window. And then we also, like within an hour of getting to orbit, there's a lot of stuff to do in the meantime. You want to just go to that window immediately, but I would say within an hour of getting to orbit, you're able to float up and get your face into a window, either as the person who's opening the payload bay doors or as somebody who just wants their face in the window and, to see Earth. And for me, I don't remember on my first flight, especially, I don't remember where we were. I don't remember if it was night or day. I don't remember if we were over water or land. I just know it was stunning and, just overwhelmingly beautiful in a way that it was kind of almost too impressive.
Is the night orbit as impactful, watching the universe in pitch dark, all the stars?
Absolutely, because, I mean, the Earth is glowing all the time, but at night you get this like a totally different sense of how it looks alive. Storms are really impressive to watch, the lightning strikes. And what I always imagined, and I'm in Florida now, but growing up in Florida, there's a lot of thunderstorms, and I just was always under this impression, stupidly, maybe naively, that, oh, there's this storm over me, and when it's gone, it's gone. But in fact, it's wrapping around the planet. I mean, it's like these tentacles of light just going from one side of Earth to the other, and these flashes looking, I mean, it really looked like the Earth was alive, looking like what you would imagine, in your science class, of neurons firing in your brain and stuff. And so there's this totally different glow and look to it. You can tell where people live and where people don't live, through the city lights. You can see the glow of the atmosphere in a way that's totally different to daytime. And also, if you get it really dark inside of the space station, just like being at a nice, dark sky viewing place, if you get it really dark inside of the space station, you can let your eyes adjust. And I mean, the night sky just like pops out of nowhere. It's and all the colors of it. And so it's just a different, colorful, glowing
Yes. When you share
view
the
of Earth.
story of how the thunderstorm moves, remind me of a documentary. I don't know if you were actually there as well in One Strange Rock with Will Smith, and how the Earth interacts with each other from the perspective.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I tell that story a lot because I think it's sometimes it's surprising to people, and then they're like, oh yeah, that's right. It's not just a storm over me. It really is this system, kind of its own ecosystem, the weather as well, that
Yes.
you know really is part of our life support system. And yeah, so if we're going to talk about Earth and Earth at night, especially, you're going to hear that one from me.
Beautiful. Okay, we can go on forever, so let's
Yeah,
continue.
absolutely.
Piero, your
Pierre.
enthusiasm for art and space, it's contagious. Thank you as well for encouraging this conversation, having the idea and organizing it. I really appreciate your assistance, Piero, and you all are welcome again into this webinar. The first question that I have for you is how your career uniquely blends in the environmental engineering with painting and photography, and how do these worlds influence on another in your work, one another? I know you always have poetic answers, so this is a perfect way to start this conversation.
Yeah, first of all, Nicole, I just want you to know that I am obviously like, very, very, I can say humble to finally meet you in person, like especially myself.
We've been trying. We've been trying.
Yeah, well, we're trying multiple times. Right?
That's my
like
fault, I think.
Right? But like, obviously a space artist, more like I am a space artist myself. And I just want you guys, listening to us to acknowledge something that just popped into my hand where you actually show the painting of the moon behind you. Like many people have been in space so far, and you can actually count the people who actually perform art in space on my single fingers in my right hands. And Nicole, you are one of them. And I just want you guys to acknowledge that space artists, having been in space, are probably the rarest human being ever, since ever. And I think I want to thank especially Jason for this, because this is what IIAS does. It allows people like this to express themselves, or to voice themselves. I think that's really important, what we do in this institute. So, Jason, thank you a lot for this. Okay, so can you just tell your question again now?
Absolutely. Your career uniquely blends environmental engineering and painting and photography. Yeah. How do these worlds influence one another in your work?
Okay, so first of all, I almost seen engineering and art not as opposite as we tend to see this nowadays, but more as complementary. And in fact, when you think about the word art itself, which is technia in Greek, in ancient Greek, which is a root for technology, actually, it actually means the mastery of a practice. So everyone somehow is an artist, is an own field. That's what I want to say. So it has never been separated. This is actually something which is quite recent. This is something we can trace about the 16th century, actually. And there is actually one person, everyone on earth knows that person, who is a perfect blend of both art and engineering. And this person, of course, is Leonardo da Vinci. No one ever questioned whether this is either an artist or an engineer. He's both at the same time. So this is a very good example where you can be an engineer while moving fluidly somehow between observation, invention, and creation. So obviously, as an engineer myself, I am trained to, let's say, to observe, to analyze systems, and to solve problems. So of course, as an artist, I focus way more on perspective, let's say, and on the kind of a human experience, if I want to formulate this way. So when you bring these two together, you actually realize that they actually try to ask or answer the very same fundamental question, which is how do we make sense of the world around us? This is what science and art actually try to enter. And space artists do this in a kind of different way, trying to answer how do we make sense of the unknown world around us. This is what we paint the surface of Mars, for instance. Just behind me, you see the surface of Mars. This is to try to understand this question. So for me, painting, photography, or writing in my case as well, are a way to translate technical data, raw data, some things that most people cannot read or understand, into something very tangible, something very human in some way. So this is where I think space exploration, I think this is really important, especially these days. We need both, obviously, the precision of physics, mathematics, engineering, medicine, and stuff, but we also need something which is more human, some more relied to poetry, for instance. And there is this French philosopher I like to quote, which called Gaston Bachelard, and he says that we do not go to space necessarily to think, but maybe more to dream of something. And I think this is where everything, fused in some way: environmental engineering, medicine, whatever this is, and art. This is where it fused. We go to dream, and to dream we need science. Short answer, as usual.
I love it. The quality of your answers. Piero, I've never asked you, how do you obtain the passion of art and the love of art? Was this family taught? Was
Oh
this
yeah.
always embodied in you?
Give me a second.
Yes. What about you, Nicole? Do you
Okay,
always
so
love the art, or?
so this brush
Yep.
actually come from my granddad. Actually, my dad gave me this brush from my granddad, and so we are a family painter since I don't know where. And so I just like, I watched my dad painting and I watched my grandpa painting before him. And it just come naturally. This is something
Yes.
maybe we share as artists, as painters, specifically. Some kind of sensitivity to colors or to whatever there is around this very specific field of art, which is painting. So I come to this quite natural. I just dive to it with I didn't have a choice actually, just like diving in. And on writing, for instance, because I write books as well, it way more come from my mom, which is a French and English teacher actually, and she
Okay.
gave me the taste of reading, and the love of words, for instance. So this all come together to I think to make an artist in the sense of a writer, let's say, or a painter. Yeah. So this is where I come from.
Thank you. Is this your case as well, Nicole, from family heritage?
I think so too, but in a little different way. I mean, my dad didn't hand me a paintbrush like that, but I mean, growing up, I absolutely credit my parents, like for sharing what they loved with me and how that kind of inspired what I latched onto along the way. My mom, very creative. And as a kid growing up, I mean, I'm old, so that was back in the days of hooked rugs and macrame and pottery and that kind of thing. And, if she was going to go do something like that, she took my sister and I with her. And if I was going to get to a ballet class or to an art class, it was because of her. And then my dad built and flew small airplanes. And a lot of that work took place in our family garage and then out at the airport. And so every bike I ever had or washing machine my mom had in the garage was splattered with all of the colors that any of those airplanes were going to be. And he let us join in. And so I think Piero, where the comment you were making about how these things come together, the science of stuff, the art of it, the creativity and the engineering of things, I think there's just a really natural blend to it. And I think it's what, if we all are willing to take advantage of all the talents we have, we bring our best then, because then we're using our whole brain. So very Leonardo, I mean, you need to use your whole brain to be the best problem solvers. And I think it's why way back in the earliest days of universities, and to this day, we still have what art colleges of arts and science. And
Mhm.
yet they separate, in at those places, they're separating these things when in fact, the best thing they could do would be to continue to bring them all together. And so I love conversations like this because I think it encourages us to remember that and to perhaps consider our whole brain activity, whether we're, leaning more one way or the other. I think we all have this mix of talents that we can share.
Correct. Pierre always mentions that, and for me, it's a new perspective. Honestly, I lack the arts aspect, and that's why I love as well having guests as you both, which are it's embodied in your passion.
I bet we
So,
could find something, David. I really bet we could.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I'm watching you. No worries. I will find something for you guys. Do
Yeah.
you sing something, or
sing
Do you
will
sing,
keep you?
David, or play a musical instrument? Or
piano, but very basic right here. Just
that's
That'll
so.
okay.
work.
See?
Yeah.
I mean, Pierre, you were mentioning like the count on your one hand. I'd like to think there's actually more of us than that, that the in space artists, maybe not didn't go to space as artists, but certainly brought it with us. And like you said, back to the days of Alexei Leonov, bringing that forward to people like Dan Bursch, basket weaving. And so I like meticulously designed, beautiful baskets, Karen Nyberg quilting, Al Warden writing poetry. I mean, these things really, we bring our humanity with us. I think it's significant for us to acknowledge it too, and then to encourage others to bring that with them as well.
Well, I fully obviously agree. I mean, like, I was narrowing this to just painting, but you are totally right. I mean, like people playing violin, for instance, in space. This is such amazing because, deep down, every single time I ask myself why I want myself to go to space, I just try to refocus on the very original question: why do you want to do this? And I frequently hear astronauts basically telling that they want to go to space for whole mankind, for instance, or enormous concept. And I feel sometimes really scared by this, because for me, I believe that we go to there as my own perspective, right? I don't imagine myself, for instance, going to Mars. Never happened, but still, if this is not to paint the very first sunrise on Mars, this is, I believe, why we should go there. This is to perform things that are uniquely human. We are artists, and this is what differentiates us from any other spaces on Earth. Like, yeah, any spaces, other spaces can have very specific, let's say, qualities that are very close to humans. There is even engineers in the nature, like beaver, for instance. But hearts is very, very human, and I believe this is why actually we go to space, as I mentioned before, maybe to dream, and to also enhance what Nicole just said. Like, I believe innovation comes from crossroads, which is why I strongly encourage people to have an art practice and a science practice in the same time, is because innovation comes from creativity, and you have to develop your creative mind in order to be able to solve with innovative solutions ever more complex problems that we have to face today here on Earth or up there in space. I think this is a very quality that sometimes is dissociated from the space industry, and I believe this is something we must probably work on, which is why I push, especially at IIAS, and thanks for the more, Jason, to allow me to do this, to push creativity inside this institute. I believe this is something that will make all of us way better in what we are trying to achieve.
Thanks, Piero. Have the next question. Next one goes to Nicole. How did painting in space inspire you to merge art and science? And what led you to create the Space for Art Foundation? And lastly, what impact do you hope to achieve throughout it?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, the whole painting in space thing was, I didn't have it planned, I guess is the thing. I wasn't thinking about it myself, honestly. In preparing to go, especially on my first flight, I was thinking about, okay, if I was thinking about anything aside from my checklists and what I needed to take to do the job and not to screw up, to be prepared that way. Um, I was focusing on things like my son's little stuffed animal to bring, stuff I wanted to take to share the experience with other people. And, we were given the opportunity to do that, especially with shuttle. I mean, we had, in grand scheme of things now, we have like this big bag, that you could take personal things in. And so I was focused more on that. And I was very grateful to my dear friend, Mary Jane Anderson, who was also the person who packed our stuff for flight. I mean, she's the one who reminded me. She's like, Nicole, you're going to be living there for months on the space station. She's like, you need to think about what, you will have free time. And when you do, what do you want to do with that? Is there something you want to bring with you that you enjoy here on Earth that you'd want to take and experience in space? And painting just is the thing that came to mind. And I picked some little, simple watercolor kit, which, by the way, they had to test all out to make sure that it wasn't going to be toxic in the atmosphere and that kind of thing. So you wouldn't be able to take, traditional oil paints with you to the space station, at least. And just brought it thinking, okay, yeah, well, maybe I'll paint sometime while I'm there. And it really was kind of toward the end of the mission. And I love that you showed your brush, Pierre, because the brush that I took with me was actually the brush that a dear friend, Ron Woods, who is also an amazing artist, gave to me to take with me. He was a flight crew equipment guy. He's the guy who like suited up the Apollo guys to go to the moon. He's the guy who was still working in that group when I started at Kennedy Space Center. We got to be really close friends, but he's an amazing watercolor artist. And his subject is always like spacesuits or a glove or a quick disconnect on something. I mean, the tape that's used for, wrapping the space station, stuff like that. And so it was really special to have this brush with me too and be able to use it. And so I'm like, okay, I have to paint because Ron will get upset too if I don't actually paint with the brush. And so finally, towards the end of the mission, that first mission, I found the time. It's a little difficult to do that, even though you do have free time. And I focused on it. And it was absolutely one of the personal highlights for me of flying in space. To take this picture, this image that I'd seen through the window of the space station, this gorgeous, tiny little chain of islands on the northern coast of Venezuela called Las Rocas, which I mean, I remember being, in front of the window, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's it. That's what I need to paint. And looking and thinking like, holy moly, it looks like somebody had reached down like with this ginormous paintbrush and painted a wave on the ocean. So I'm taking pictures of it and, remembering that I had done that because, of course, for those who love plein air painting, that's not going to happen on the space station because what you're seeing out the window at 5 miles a second, it's going to be gone before you can get the brush to the paper. So, I had to print out a little, picture of the place, and I did that, and I just kept it posted up by my crew quarters, and I would paint a little bit at night, and dipping my brush into floating balls of water and watching the interaction of the color with the water, and all these things that I wish I would have videotaped it if I had activated my brain cell to do that, but I didn't. And it just because I think it would have been, aside from painting, I really think all of these things and what you're talking about, Pierre, too, it's like this need for us to bring our humanity with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Painting, music, quilting, basket weaving. I mean, these are things that it's like putting the human in human spaceflight. And
Okay.
whether I think I was told I could take that paint kit or not, I would have brought something, I think, that, that did that for me. And so I think it's so cool that we do that. And, so I painted, I did this painting. It looks like a kindergartner did it. For me, everything is experimental. I'm not trained other than those classes as a kid, but I loved it. And I am very grateful that I had the experience. I think videotaping, it's like always like when you guys go to space, take me with you so I can just paint with watercolors so that I can videotape doing it. Because I think part of what it could do as well is it would be a really beautiful way to just present, to show, to communicate what it's like to live in that floaty environment where everything floats. You're floating, your stuff floats, how conscious you have to be, conscientious, I guess, about keeping track of your stuff, all of that. It's a big deal. And I think just by videotaping that, we could show that whole living in space thing in a totally new way than, trying to talk about it or show pictures. But all right, long rambling answer. So amazing experience to be able to do that in space. Really loved it. When I got back to Earth and after my second flight, and shortly after that, I was thinking about the timing in life was, even though I was in line to fly again, it was like making sense to me to think, oh my gosh, there's other stuff I want to do. Our son was going to be starting high school soon. We didn't, God bless Houston, but we didn't want to be in Houston for that. And so was thinking about moving on, and I just kept coming back to that opportunity to paint in space. And it made me really realize, and I think again, Pierre, to what you're saying, it's like how much connection I could make to people who don't even know we have an International Space Station through my art. I could share that experience in a way and open up people's hearts and minds maybe to what's going on in space. It's all about improving life on Earth, and communicate that through my own artwork that was showing, here's what I interpreted art or Earth to look like from space. And honestly, whether people liked my artwork or not was not really the motivation. It was more, how can I get more people involved? How can I get them to understand this? And that was going actually really good. After I retired, that was actually going really well. But I got invited to participate in a program at the local pediatric cancer center at MD Anderson. Honestly thought I was going to go do this one-off program with these kids. We were going to paint, and then we were going to create an art spacesuit out of it. And I think within 5 minutes of being in that place, I discovered my next mission in life, which, long story short, evolved into the Space for Art Foundation, where we're working with kids all over the world. Wow. Who are in hospitals and refugee centers and orphanages and schools around the world, and bringing their, artwork together in a bigger way, some of which has gotten to fly to the space station. And really, in the short, space-themed art therapy. And it's been, if I could do nothing else right now, that would be it.
How beautiful. And you were not even thinking on that when you were an astronaut back then, I suppose, then?
No, I wasn't. I mean, I've always wanted art to be part of what I'm doing. I mean, it always has been. Even, if I consider, working on my house, building things, creating things, even if it's not painting, I consider that to be like an artistic creative outlet. And I've always enjoyed working with kids that way too. And it's incredible how the adults want to be involved, even if you're, making little art spacesuits with kids. And I think it opens up their minds too. And it's allowed me and, these other people that I work with to really, I think, open it up in a way that's inviting people to be crewmates and not passengers on our planetary spaceship, to really look at the humanity of it all, within space exploration, within what we're doing here on Earth, and figure out how you become a crewmate and not a passenger.
Nicole, you mentioned for somebody else to bring back the pencils and record all of that. Do you remember any difficulty through that you were not envisioning while you were packing that? And then it was time for you to paint. Then you open that, use the pencil. Then what are some problems that started happening with the paint?
Well, I don't think it ever was really a problem. I think it was more, and this is why I think it would have been so much fun to videotape it and use it as a way to demonstrate what it's like to live in a place where you float and everything floats, is that everything floats. And so it's different. And that was it. Like, this discovery of what was different about it was really fun. And it wasn't more difficult. It was just different. And you had to take into account the environment you were in. I mean, I think about you painting on Mars, Pierre. It's going to be different, right? Are you even going to be able to go outside to do that? Is there going to be a way that you can, kind of paint outside somehow, even though it's still going to have to be contained in some way? Or will you be able to, paint in the, this lower gravity and less dense environment of Mars where you can't breathe and you're in a spacesuit, but maybe the paints could be exposed to it in some way, and you can use paper differently and just use that environment of space to help you create. And I think that's what was really special about it. And yeah, I mean, I messed up a lot, that brush of Ron's. I mean, I had that ball of colored water on the end of it, and it took me a while to figure out, okay, I can't touch the brush to the paper, right? If I did that, the whole blob of colored water just went into the paper. So I had to figure out, and it was cool because this you can't do on Earth either. I mean, I had to figure out, how far do I have to keep the tip of the brush away from the paper with a colored ball of water just kind of being dragged along the paper versus painting with the brush. So it was really cool that way. And yeah, I was frustrated, and yes, I wish I would have saved all those little scraps that I threw out when, starting multiple times. And I wish I would have brought the paint kit home and, all those kinds of things in hindsight. But I loved the experience. And I'm so happy when I hear about other people taking advantage of that environment that way and just experiencing the difference of it.
Did the surface tension kept the water droplet, the color water droplet in the brush?
I think surface tension was definitely a big factor in the way, you've got this floating ball of water that you dip in. And before I would even touch the tip of the brush to the ball of water, it's like the whole ball of water wanted to move onto the tip of the brush. And then, you have this three-dimensional ball of water just floating. Unless you, flung it around, it was going to stay on the end of the brush. And then it kind of got pulled onto the colored paints. And I mean, it was just the whole experience of watching that was pretty magical. And then figuring out how not to touch the brush to the paper and all those things that you just had to, here's the process of it here, and figure that out. But yeah, the floatiness is a big deal.
That is a good video to record how to paint in space.
Yeah.
Episode 1 with Nicole. Okay, Piero, as both an engineer and an artist, how do you think creativity can contribute to addressing global environmental issues?
Wow. All right. Okay, I get this one. Okay. All right. Okay. So first of all, global environmental issue, global issue, whatever they are, we are not, as a human species, we're not equipped to deal with this kind of global issues, which is why our answer to COVID, for instance, was somehow critical to our survival, but so disparate. So we necessarily need to use other tools, and I believe creativity is one of our strongest tools possible. Like climate change, resource scarcity, let's say, or I don't know, biodiversity loss. What does this even mean? What's behind this? These are very, very complex problems, and without easy templates somehow. So you need to find a way to address this. And engineering and scientists, just like me, for instance, brings in environment I'm talking about. We brings data, raw data to the people, and this is unreadable data for most of the people, of course. So, but it is creativity that actually illustrates the issues. Like, let's think about like let's say a catastrophe movie, for instance, that will illustrate like the day after tomorrow, for instance. This kind of movies that that illustrates an issue, or that allows us to imagine new solutions. For instance, sci-fi is very good at this, or communicates them in a way that will let's say inspire action. So heart, especially heart, has the power, I believe, to how can I say that, to shift mind. You can change its perspective with heart. And a very good example, you know what, I'm thinking about this right now. A very good example is an American painter called Thomas Moran. Okay, so Thomas Moran was a painter in the 1870s, something like this, so early age of the United States. And he actually painted Yellowstone. And his painting were actually shown to the US Congress at this time, and his artwork actually helped the United States Congress and inspired them to create the very first national park in the United States, Yellowstone. So this is a direct link between where art can contribute to address a very global environmental issue. In that case, it was about protecting something that inspired people because it was fragile, beautiful, whatever you name it, but still it has an environmental value. So this is something art can help to do. And trust me, no scientific report or technical report can ever do this. And I know this because I write technical report on a daily basis and no one reads it. So that's a fun part of my job. So when people,
Pierre, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, but because actually when you were talking about like painting Earth, for instance, or seeing Earth, or like taking photos of Earth, for instance, like I think about like Don Petty or Thomas Pesquet's photos of Earth. So you actually touch people. Or when you take, for instance, I'll give you an example. Like last week, actually, I took a picture of the Northern Lights above Montreal here in Canada, where I live. But I have to work obviously the process, because it is very difficult still even in Montreal to see northern lights above the city, because the sky is so evilly light polluted that you cannot actually enjoy this free and beautiful show we have on a daily basis in some period of time in Montreal. But showing this to my colleague, showing the picture and what they actually could experience themselves if we have a clear sky, for instance, it really helped me to how can I say this, to raise awareness among them to the fragility of that environment above our head, which is tragically underestimated, which is the night sky, obviously. So this is something art can do. It can touch people emotionally, and when you have an emotional response to something, you are more tend to act than if you have like a raw factual connection with a system. I can also illustrate this very simply with one very good example. I can tell you that the vast majority of Canadian people here in Canada do not know their own astronauts here right now in Canada, but everyone knows Chris Hadfield. You know why? Because he played the guitar in space. Everyone knows him in Canada, of course, and worldwide, because he performed hard, because he directly touched people. And this is extraordinarily important, as Nicole said, to connect people with what we want to do in space exploration. Space industry and space exploration is really bad at communicating with people about what we are truly trying to do. Like we have to be honest with ourselves. Our space is more and more seen as a waste of money for the vast majority of people, because they do not realize the concrete application of what we are doing in space and what is the impact here on Earth, because we do not communicate this efficiently. And the way to do this is to do hard, is to link the people with what we are doing here in space and why this is important for Earth. Like, why do we spend money to go to Mars? What's the point of it? Like, yes, there is a real answer to this. It varies. It just could be to better understand our own physiology, better understand our own planet, because learning about Mars is learning about our own planet, of course. And all of this needs to be translated in something else than raw data coming from Hubble or coming from any kind of satellite surrounding this planet. We need to address this in an art way. And I think the very future of environmental problem solving lies in this very subtle blending between both science and art. And we absolutely need to work on this to just survive, as not as an industry, but as a field of activity, as space explorers. We need to work on this. Otherwise, we're going to lose people somehow.
Yeah, Pierre, you said something, the word connection, I think, is what's so important. I think is what art does just in general, whether it's connecting them to what's going on in space or just to, something that's important to them otherwise, what's going on here on Earth. I think that's huge. And what I love is when you talk to scientists who say, oh, I don't use art, I don't need art. I'm a scientist, I don't have that side of my brain, doesn't work, and I'm like, dude, you guys are some of the most wonderful users of art in terms of conveying the complexity of what you're studying, right? And I think even for the scientist, the art is what, even if they don't call it that, is what brings the reality of what they're studying to life for them, right? You mentioned Hubble. I mean, those guys could look at the ones and zeros, but it would take even longer to get through the data we've got from Hubble if it was just ones and zeros they were looking at. And the benefit is that we get that beautiful imagery, but in fact, that beautiful imagery is representing temperature and distance and gases and all of these things and all the pretty colors, and their brain wraps around that better than the ones and zeros. So it's a very purposeful tool, right? And from the environmental standpoint, I think about the fact that, the majority of the data we need to understand the condition, kind of the operation of our planetary life support systems is coming to us from space, right? And one of the best things I've seen recently was this display at the NASA headquarters building called the Earth Information Center, where they are taking all the real-time data from the Earth observation satellites and they're presenting it in this really beautiful, colorful way that allows you to understand what does it mean that carbon dioxide is, abundant in our atmosphere in a negative way. What does it mean about methane or surface temperatures or ocean, sea, heights and all of the, glacial melting, all of this kind of stuff, and down to even the biodiversity numbers that we need to know to manage those planetary challenges. And it's all presented in a way that you can wrap your brain around when you see it, and it makes a connection to you and you want to then, oh my gosh, do something about it or figure out, okay, what little thing in my life can I do that could help change the colors on that chart to make it a pretty picture and not a bad one.
But I think this you make an excellent point about like our own role as an engineer, as engineers, medics, scientists, whoever there we are, in addressing this problem. We are good at providing data to people, but we are really poor at showing the true value of them, and it creates the problem we are facing today. We're talking just about environment, like let's say climate change denial, for instance. This comes from the poor understanding of the raw data we are providing to people. We are giving a lot of scenarios and a lot of whatever we do with our numbers, but we do not translate it efficiently for the people. We do not have the same access to knowledge as we are. And I'm not only talking about here in North America or in Europe, for instance, but I'm talking about people in countries that have less access to education or a source of information simply. But these people are the one we need to focus on right now, and the people we need to convince that what we are doing right now is important. Also because we want to broaden the access to space, especially for the countries who have no access to space right now. And before, David, you mentioned space for all nation, and I believe this is this kind of connection we absolutely need to make with other people around this planet. But it goes with us scientists or engineers and medics to be more aware of the power of art as a tool to communicate very complex issues into something way more simpler, were more tangible for people to make this information their own and to act efficiently like this, you know. It just like one person, you know, we just need to change the perception of one person to address climate change, one person at a time. That's what I'm talking. Well, I won't say, but this goes from Chris Hadfield playing the guitar to Nicole illustrating watercolor from space to me casually like making some artworks in my sketchbook and showing to my colleagues, for instance. It starts like this, like trying to simplify the information to make your point one point at a time. Simple.
Next question, Nicole. Space is often described as a place of perspective. What did looking back at Earth teach you about our planet and humanity? That must be one of the most common questions to astronauts. But also, is there any negative aspect that you maybe thought while being in space? Maybe you thought about politics in a sad way, maybe seeing the Earth as beautiful as it is, and us as a species endangering our own planet, our own mother. Is there something that you recall that you can share with us?
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, I think it's wonderful, you know, to have the opportunity to like actually really spend time and like let it sink in, you know, looking out the window and experiencing that. I think it's a real reality check in all those ways that you just mentioned. The beauty of it for sure. There's a bit of conflict in that though, I think, because as human beings, we know it's kind of like you're watching the whole planet with the mute button on. You know, you're watching these big hurricanes move across the ocean and looks like this big white fluffy spiraling, you know, gorgeousness, and when in fact you know that the people below it are thinking anything but that. You know, it's not beautiful and gorgeous and white and fluffy to them, it's disastrous. And so but that same kind of conflicting thought could be with respect to politics or the environment or, you know, any of the other things you mentioned, David. And I think that's what makes us human too. You know, Pierre, you mentioned the ability to create, and it's also to be curious and I think analyze as well. That, you know, that puts us in that place as humans, and to acknowledge what we're seeing, you know, visually, but also to understand what we're seeing, you know, thoughtfully. And I mean, I remember thinking that a lot. I mean, it goes beyond. I mean, the very basics of it, I think, are this, you know, this like looking out the window and being like, oh my gosh, we live on a planet in space, right? You know, we all know that, right? But that's a big deal. We tend to live our lives not thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Or somehow we learn that in kindergarten and then we move on through our lives and it's in the farthest, you know, back part of our brains. And I really feel like if, I mean, I do it now. Every morning I wake up, my feet hit the floor, and I'm like, I am standing on a planet in space. I'm spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. I am going around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour. And this is a big deal. This place is like, there's nothing else like it that we know of. You know, that we gotta protect it. You know, all of those kinds of things. And that's going through your brain when you're looking through the window, right? Oh my gosh, that's a planet in space, and how we're all earthlings. And this reality that the only border that matters is that veil thin blue line of atmosphere that's blanketing and protecting us all.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That is what we all have in common. And it, like, I get goosebumps thinking about it now. It is a reality check. Like, holy moly, let's figure out how we treat that in a way and understand our place within that. And and then, we talked about this crewmate thing before, but I really feel like everything you see through that window, I don't care if it's a forest fire, if it's a flood, if it's a glacier melting, if it's a hurricane, if it's the ocean and little, atolls in the Maldives, all of it looks beautiful. All of it. Even the most disastrous thing that's going on Earth looks beautiful from that place. But the reality is it's not all that way. And so this power that we have by accepting our role as crewmates and not passengers here, like on our planetary spaceship as well, it really does. I mean, we have the power to create a future that's as beautiful for all life on Earth as it looks from space by accepting that role. And it's the same way we live and thrive and survive on our machine in space. we have to behave like crewmates or we don't survive there. And I think that's the big deal in all of it. You know, the science, the relationships, and all of it comes down to those kind of underlying common things for all of us. And you don't have to be on a machine in space, and you don't have to fly to space off the planet. We're already in it. You know, you don't have to leave the planet to appreciate that. And that's where I think, Pierre, the beauty, the reality perhaps that art can bring to us, the connection that it can help us make to everything, the science of it, the culture of it, the environment of it, you know, can come to us through art in a way that it can't through so many other things out there.
But you know, I so agree with this. Like you know, like restoring our whole connection with our environment is, and by extension, planet is so important. And it starts by something like everyone can do. You know, like when I go for a hike. Let's say I was in Utah. Let's say last spring, and so obviously I draw a lot when I'm in Utah and everywhere. But I take my, you know, my sketchbook with me and just like go and painting and on the cliff, and that's it. And obviously this is beautiful bright sky, and it was amazing at this time of the year, of course. So I had an amazing time. But you know, when you sit down and experience the painting doesn't matter. What you are actually doing is embracing the landscape, just seeing this pure raw beauty of the nature. When it comes to you, when it impacts you so hard that the only way to express it is painting, this is what art is all about. It's just sitting and observing what the majesty of what you have around you. And it can be anywhere. It can be in the middle of the city if you want. It can be in deep down in the Grand Canyon. It can be wherever you want to do, and in space, of course, as well. Sit down and just enjoying the moment and the pure majesty of what we are. And when you say that we're on a kind of a spacecraft, somehow natural spacecraft flying into the void, like when you think about it, like just reflect about this and just what are we doing with our planet? It's just incredible. And I believe that unconsciously, this is probably one of the reasons that drive us to go to Mars, for instance. We need to go to Mars in order for us to realize that there is no planet B. There is just one planet A, and we must protect it at any cost. Because this is the only place where we could live, where we can live. That we will never be able to live on a long-term period on Mars. This is just simply physiologically for our species not possible right now, of course, right now. But I mean, this should encourage us to take an extra care of this planet every single day. Just have one small action. You know, here on Earth or there is play in space. I think this is our duty to do our best to educate people through art, in my case, about the environmental issues we are facing on a daily basis.
Beautiful answers. That brings me to a perspective. Imagine if all of what you shared today, Nicole, it was watching the Earth so close. The ISS and the space shuttle, maybe 300, 400 kilometers. It's just right there. It's so huge that you cannot see outside of it. But just going to the moon, it's an extra step. You see the Earth, but it's now a sphere floating. It's an entire new perspective. Going to Mars, you can lose the sight of our own planet in the first 2 weeks, I think, or so. You're just not going to see it, only a dot. Then how can that shift? If what you saw changed you, imagine going to the moon, imagine getting to Mars and forgetting about the Earth. It's just something that is going to be needed. That perspective and that careness that Piero is suggesting right now. I'm gonna have to quote once again this documentary, Nicole, because you were featured on it. Thank you. It's honestly one of the best documentaries that I've ever seen. Also, Chris Hadfield is on it, Peggy, and One Strange Rock. It just features the connectivity and how everything is interconnected, how the thunderstorms, the hurricanes, and the disasters that appear on Earth are interconnected and in some sense trying to heal the planet itself. So it's very good. I'm going to put it in the chat now that we have you here, but it's just beautiful. We have the last question of the day. This is for both. And many of our audience members are students and young professionals. What advice will you give to young people, especially from emerging nations who dream of contributing to space exploration or just art itself. Maybe they don't have that perspective as me. I lack that knowledge. Where should I start on art? How can I get enrolled, or what will be some advice to young generations?
Buy this. That's all what you need.
So good.
Period.
Well, and Pierre, I think that's it, right? It's like that's the first step. And it doesn't matter if you're scribbling or writing or just I don't know, just appreciating in some way and then translating that into that pad. I think what you said Pierre, before is really important, and about appreciating around you no matter where you are, like sucking that in and I always like to think of that as, we're in space on a spaceship looking back at Earth. And like you said, David, 250, 300 miles above the planet, not that far away, right? And yet it is a whole new perspective on it. And it's awesome and it's wonderful and all of those words. But holy moly, I can go in my backyard and I am surrounded by awe and wonder every day. You can be in Bryce Canyon like Pierre was, with like in a place that you've never been before. And for some
Mm-hmm.
reason, it allows us to appreciate it more, to like open our hearts and minds to it more. But we
Yeah.
are surrounded by it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the one thing I would love to encourage everybody to do, to realize that we are, like you said, David, we're on a really special place. And Pierre, there is no planet B. And when we go to Mars, we got to turn it into a spaceship because it is not going to support our life. And the moon, we got to create the life support there. And and when we are, what is it, the closest, like 36 million miles away is Mars closest orbit, something like that. I can't remember. And that it is, Earth will not look like Earth anymore. So we have to find ways to imagine and remember and appreciate it. But there will be awesomeness and wonder around us there as well. That's just different than it is in any place else that we are. And I think as humans, that's what, makes us so cool too, is that if we allow ourselves to, we really can appreciate the awe and wonder of it all. And then we can bring it to life through our art or our engineering or both,
Mm-hmm.
in a really wonderful way that connects with,
Yeah.
people right there with us and people, on the other planet.
True.
And
Not
even
only
if you,
our own Earth and our own species, but also be mindful of what that we are sharing this planet, right? We
exactly.
need to take care not only of ourselves, but animals and plants, and they both belong in space. Pets belong in space, and also the plants. But yes, we have to be mindful of that. Continue, Pierre. Sorry that I interrupted you.
No, no, no worries at all. I mean, like, we mentioned something earlier. I think Nicole said this, but innovation comes from crosswords. So, if I were to give like just one piece of advice, I would just like to quote one of my teacher in engineering school in France back in days, and he told me when you can, because I was obviously drawing, everywhere on my class book, let's say, and my teacher really hated this, but one teacher, and he told me like, yeah, if you can draw, you can do anything. And okay, so it wasn't. I remember it was an hydrology class actually in engineering school, and it really, it was a shift in my own mind. So because I really understand these days that I could actually combine paths, and this is something I encourage people to do. Like whether it says like, are you passionate by engineering and art, or science and storytelling, or medicine and music? Like do both. Like do you embrace diversity? And it's gonna be hard. I'm gonna tell you, this is gonna be hard because people tend to they may not understand exactly what you want to do, or they will tend to tell you to choose one thing, like specialize in one thing. I don't think this is necessarily a good option. So embrace diversity, expose yourself to the world, open yourself to travel as much as you can to discover new cultures and beautiful place. But it just go, just walk by the street where you live. You don't have to paint, as Nicole said, in your sketchbook. You just carry it with you and just like, I don't know, bring your cell phone and just snap a picture you like, something like this. Art starts this, because art is not the final. I will show you something. This is a commission I'm working on. This is not art. This is the result of art. This is from the Lord of the Rings anyway. But this is the result of art. Art is the process itself. It starts when you decide it starts. So if David, for instance, playing the piano, you want to start replaying the piano, art starts at this very second. And the end of it is just you playing something. But the whole process of art is art. And this is the process you need to have to create that crossword that will lead you to innovation and new answer to new problem on Mars.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Nicole. Now we have open a question. If anybody has a question, you can turn on your camera if you would like to be seen and ask a question. And if not, there's the chat open as well. Let's give them some time. Or maybe you both to each other. Nicole, a question for Pierre, or Pierre for Nicole.
Well, I was going to say to Pierre that I really like the conversation or the comments like that you had to deal with from your professors and how, how we discover things through that. But I think this fits with what you've described to me. I mean, one of the very first lessons I learned as an engineer, working on the space shuttle program at Kennedy Space Center, was from like a dear mentor, but I mean, honestly, hero of the space program, who was my boss at the time, who we were at the point where we were getting back to shuttle flight post Challenger. And, it was a difficult time for the program. And we had all these young engineers that had come in. I had just graduated from college. There were hundreds of us like kind of flocked into KSC to start this work. And one of the very first things this man said to us, in encouraging us in this job was, that the way we do really difficult things is, number one, we have to bring the best of ourselves, like all of the best of ourselves. And the way I think about that, especially in relation to this conversation, is don't just take this part of your brain and say, I'm bringing that. You bring all of your talents to bear. And then in doing that, first of all, you have to believe that there is a solution to every challenging problem. You have to go into it believing that. And I think creativity allows you to believe that in a much more open way. And then the approach that you need to take to overcome really challenging things is to approach it with a here's how we can, not why we can't, like attitude to everything. And I think that works with art. I think that works with the plumber that was my house today. I think that works with getting people into space and you guys to Mars one day. I think it's all about deciding that there is a solution and how we can do it versus getting all bogged down and why we can't. And that would be one big piece of advice for me, is like, believe what Jay Honeycutt said. Here's how we can, not why we can't. All right, I see hands.
Two ones. How was the weight on the pad before you took off? Are the seats nice?
The shuttle was very comfortable, I have to say. Of course, you're laying on your back, right? And, imagine your airplane rotated 90 degrees. And, we would get out to the launch pad a couple hours before launch. And the flight crew, quite honestly, doesn't have any like major role in the countdown until about 20 minutes out. So, I mean, you get comfortable. And I remember napping, like my crewmates, we all were kind of snoozing for a little while, just, chill before, the action was going to start. And, you're anxious, right? You're anxious for what it's going to feel like. I think, I get asked a lot, was I afraid? I wasn't afraid. I think we train for all the things that we think we know can go wrong. And if it's humanly possible, we'd have been able to deal with it. And I think you're just anxious for what it's going to feel like. And any fear to me was related to my family watching me, right? A lot more difficult for your parents, your husband, your spouse, your significant other, your kids, to watch you strap onto a rocket that's going to have 7 million pounds of exploding rocket stuff underneath it than it is to be the person doing it. And so it was like anxiousness, but in a overall good way. Yeah.
Wow. No more questions, but I have another one. Thank you, Ellie, for your question. Nicole, I'm very intrigued of not only watching the Earth, but the night sky. That's one of the reasons why I want to go to space, in addition to many others. But just watching the night skies, is there any night sky that you can compare here on Earth that maybe reminded you of your days in the ISS or the space shuttle?
Yeah, I mean, I was really fortunate to travel the last few years to the Maldives, and man, it's dark there. And I will also compare that. My husband is from the Isle of Man, and they have, I think, 10 designated. This is like a 300 square mile island where I think they have it's either 8 or 10 designated dark sky locations. I mean, literally cannot see your hand in front of your face dark. And the skies in those two places, man, it's like when you could just look up at the night sky and see the Milky Way and get a picture of it on your iPhone. I
Yeah.
mean, that
Yes.
it with no special training, that's impressive. And so those two places really to me, because the sky, like looking at the night sky from the space station was it's like like through the window, everything, the earth, the sky, the blackness of space, it's like there's this iridescence, this translucent, this color to it that I haven't really experienced anywhere else. There's like a depth to it. I mean, when you look at the night sky here in a normal, like lit night sky, kind of looks flat. Even if you see a
Yeah.
lot of stars, it kind of looks flat. The view through the space station window, it looked like there was depth to it. Like you didn't know how far it was from one star to another, but it looked like, there was depth. And and there was all the color of the Milky Way. And that, yeah, just I'll shut up.
Oh my God.
The Maldives and Isle of Man, two best places I've experienced since then. And Utah, actually, Utah Canyonlands. That was pretty impressive.
Okay, we're gonna write them down. It's the first time that I ever hear about an astronaut mentioning the depth. This is very interesting. I'm gonna dream with this. Aaron, go ahead, ask the question. If you wanna turn the camera on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So hey, I want to get back to the painting in microgravity. At the IIAS, we have parabolic flights. We don't quite have access to that continuous time. And so, Nicole, I was wondering, for people that might want to try painting on a parabolic flight, given your experience, do you have any pointers, lessons learned to hand off to them? Because those 20 seconds are really going to matter.
Aaron, you got to be very organized. You got to be ready, right? And I actually tried. Have I'm so glad you guys get to do parabolic flights. It's so cool. And I, had the chance to fly a number of times on them. And one, I did bring some watercolors and played around a little bit and painted some parabolas on a piece of paper and stuff. It was fun. But I realized even there, you have to be even more organized than you will with continuous microgravity. I mean, and you can do it. You can do it. And I would say one of the things to do might be to just, play a little bit with like squirting some water out, because they always will play with water on one of those flights, at some point with, a ball of floating water, and be thoughtful about it. Be deliberate to have like a floating ball of water and, see how the brush interacts with it, on one parabola, and then maybe, get the floating ball of water and mush it into some paint, or play with that on another parabola, and then maybe see if you can actually get it to the paper. I mean, I think in those 20-second, over the tops, it's going to be difficult to actually paint a painting. But you could have fun. You could do a little splatter fest if you wanted to. I don't know if you've ever seen that. What's that band? Okay.
That's right. Yeah, I know on the zero G flight. That's right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was fantastic what they did. But I know that there's probably Zero G Corp and others would get upset with you if you just did that on your own. But I think you can very thoughtfully do it. I think you could do the stages of it, and get a sense of it there.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the certification that your paint had to go through before it could launch, on a parabolic flight, we face probably a similar issue with zero containment liquids and so on.
Yeah, I think they want, you should want, and they want it to not be, toxic anyway. That's a pretty enclosed space, letting up some, super smelly oil paint's probably not the best. And you want to be able to clean it up. I mean, the same thing was true on the station. You want to be able to clean it up too. And, in hindsight, watercolors, I think, really was the best option. Even acrylic paints would have been just you'd have to have a different brush for every color, you know, you'd have to think about that. And I don't know if you guys know, but Richard Garriott, when he flew, he brought acrylic paints with him, and I want to slap him because he doesn't say he painted. I'm like, dude, you painted in space. You just let space paint for you, because he built like this plastic box, and then he stuck pieces of paper up all around the inside of the, you know, glove box essentially, and then he just squirted the paints in there and let them do whatever they were going to do. Very Jackson Pollocky. And it's so cool. And I think that's like, Pierre, when you talk about painting on Mars someday, I think that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to let the environment contribute to the creation of the art, and that's what's going to make it so special. And Aaron, that's what happens when you're on a parabolic flight or you're on a space station. I think it's true here too, you know. Depending on where you are, you got to consider the place that you're in and how you're going to organize your stuff and paint.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that is a wrap up then. Nicole and Pierre, thank you. It was really an honor to allowing the opportunity to interview you both. Thank you for being so humble enough to give us 1 hour of your time, sharing your insights, experiences, and especially personal stories. That is something that only humans can do. To the audience, thank you for joining us in this first episode of Season 3 of Conversations with IIAS, Art and Space, where space meets culture, science, and human stories. Don't forget to stay connected and follow us for updates on future episodes in this series. Until next time, this was David Guajardo. Get a pencil, play the piano, stay curious, and keep looking up. Nicole, Piero, thank you so much for your valuable time tonight.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much,
David.
My pleasure.
And Pierre, thanks for including me.
Oh God,
Yeah,
I love you. You know this.
we will meet in
Thank you,
person
guys.
one day. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
See ya.
See you.
Bye bye.
Bye.